there, it's Sam. I'm making this video about the Mercury retrograde cycle that just started here on June 26th. Mercury's going to be retrograde in Gemini until July 20th. And this is a, time for us to reflect upon speech, communication, and the details, and generally freak out and blame everything on Mercury retrograde if you follow astrology. Just kidding. No, this is typically, a time when people start to get a little ungrounded about astrology, at least people that haven't studied very much. It's definitely something that we need to understand. The retrograde planet does create some disruptions around things, and I'm going to talk about how that works. But it also gives enormous promise in other areas. Now, typically what we hear is, you'll hear people say, well, it's bad in Western, but it's considered good in Vedic. These kind of things that people love to say. The thing about it is, it really acts the same regardless. You just have to look and see what the planet rules and what is happening astronomically to really understand the retrograde planet. So, first of all, Mercury is not the only planet that goes retrograde. All planets go retrograde because of their relationship to the Earth and the speed of the Earth and the speed of the planets. Now, it's true that the planet is not actually moving backwards in its orbit, but some people will just say, well, then retrograde is just an optical illusion. It doesn't actually exist. Well, it's not actually going retrograde in its orbit, so that part is, and that part is not true, but it's not really an optical illusion any more than if you're in a fast-moving car going 60 miles an hour and you pass a car going 40 miles an hour, that it's an optical illusion. Okay, that car is not actually moving backwards, that's moving 40 miles per hour, but it's not moving as fast as you are in the car that you're going that's traveling 60 miles per hour. So for all intents and purposes, that car that's moving 40 miles per hour is not keeping up with you. And this is a more effective metaphor for the retrograde planet. It's a very effective one, actually. I use this a lot. Because let's say you're going somewhere, and you and your friend are going, and your car is going 70 miles an hour, and their car is going 50 miles an hour. They're not keeping up. So you're going to have to keep looking back to make sure that they're still on the highway and they're still there. They're going to keep requiring your attention because they're not moving as fast as you are. This is a very good metaphor for the retrograde planet. Now, when it's in a natal chart, which means when it's in someone's birth chart, then that's their sort of pattern. They're sort of patterned, that planet is not keeping up with the speed of their life. And so based on what the planet rules as a karaka or a natural indicator first, and then also the houses that it rules secondarily, those things aren't going to really keep up. And this is because those are the things that the planet produces externally, the tangible results that the planet produces. And again, it's relative to the planet's speed to our speed on Earth, because the Earth part is what gets produced. You live on Earth, you've incarnated with a body, and the forms that come out on Earth are what the planets rule as a karaka and as a house ruler. Houses determine what gets produced, and the planet as a karaka. So that's what the planet produces. It produces what it rules as a karaka and as a house ruler. So those things with the retrograde planet tend to not manifest easily. They keep requiring our attention. But what the planet is related to as, like for instance, as a psychological force, an internal reflective force, more of a spiritual force, like the pure nature of the planet, like Mercury is the pure quality of the details and communication and speech and flexibility and creativity. Those things get very enhanced by the retrograde planet because we have to keep paying attention to it. Because it's not keeping up, we have to keep paying attention to it, and that attention is much more reflective and internal, and it really develops the planet as a karaka, a non-living karaka. Because there's the living karaka that the planet produces, like Jupiter produces children, Saturn produces old people, Venus produces romantic partners. Those living things that the planet produces as a karaka gets interrupted. But the Intangible things get strengthened because we have to keep paying attention to the non-living thing, or to the living thing that's not getting produced easily. So the planet as a karaka gets of living karaka gets interrupted, and the planet as a house ruler. So if Mercury rules the 5th house, let's say if it's a Taurus person, then let's say a Taurus or an Aquarius person where Mercury rules the 5th house, then Mercury will also interrupt children. This is if it's in the natal chart, because the 5th house is related to children. So writing, speech, and communication, which is what Mercury produces externally, and children will get interrupted. But then the internal reflective quality of Mercury, like having to adjust, having to be more flexible, and having to, strengthen our inner dialogue, will become, more purified because of that reflective quality. So again, it's very easy when you look at the motion of the planet to understand what it's doing, because it's moving backwards. It moves internally. It's an internal force. Our life is moving at the speed of the world. The retrograde planet is not quite keeping up. So we have to keep going back and paying attention and making sure that it's keeping up. So between now and July 20th, Mercury is going retrograde in Gemini. Again, this is going to influence all of us. And it's a good time for us to really reflect on, literally on speech and communication. It's a good sign for Mercury to go retrograde in because Mercury rules Gemini. So especially if, like for instance, if you do any kind of writing or any kind of creative project, it's good to go back and do some editing right now. It's good to go back and redo things, reorganize things, re-edit. And of course, this can work in all areas of life. In relationships, renegotiate, let's say, what your boundaries are and things. Mercury is very much about those kinds of things. Certainly for tangible things, like even, let's say, contracts. They say it's not good to sign contracts. The big, which by the way, I don't necessarily agree with. I've started many things when Mercury's retrograde. It really depends on the exact time that you do it. You cannot say a 3.5 week time period is not good for any one thing. Picking auspicious times involves all kinds of things. There's a lot of auspicious timing right now. However, I would say that Mercury retrograde is favorable for going back and, let's say, fixing something that might not be good with an existing contract, whether it be with a person or with an entity or something like that. And it's good to go back and revisit all kinds of things, especially, things that are interpersonal. Mercury is a Rajasic planet, which has to do with how we handle each other, how we deal with people. And again, that's because of all the details and the need to be flexible and to adjust to others. And so all of these things can be really supported between now and July 20th. But of course, what happens is in these areas of life where you're not staying on top of the details, where you let things become sloppy, like with computers or with your communication systems or whatever, those things can tend to really falter when Mercury goes retrograde because, and in fact that faltering makes you go back and get them better. So the best thing to do is to actually try to take care of those things before Mercury goes retrograde, and then you won't necessarily have a detriment or a deficit to clean up. So maybe do that right now. Make sure that like your hard drive is clean. Like I've had before in the past when Mercury went retrograde, I think it was in Pisces one time not too long ago, I had like my websites were hacked, and it was because I didn't have proper security scripts installed and proper passwords and scripts updated and stuff. So this is why you see that. And then now I make sure to always stay on top of it. So this is how the retrograde planet teaches us. By us not paying so much attention to it, we have a problem and a deficit. So Mercury retrograde is definitely good for reflecting on the details, reflecting on how you're communicating, getting that better, renegotiating certain types of things, but you might expect that some of the things you haven't been so tight with, some of the details that you haven't been so good with, could mess up. So leave me a quick comment and let me know what you think about this.